You are the most important person in your life. So prioritize your health, your spirit, your comfort. Take good care of yourself. It's not selfish. The world keeps spinning as if nothing happened, but no one can keep you safe. So give yourself a little peace tonight. Through this story, if you've ever whispered, "I'm tired of being hurt," come, sit next to me. Leave your comments below what finally stopped hurting. Like this video if you've overcome your old self. Subscribe for more silent revolutions like this. And now take a breath. Here we go. Why are you not free? Healing story, The Invisible Cage. I once met a woman named Alara. She was in her late 30s, lived in a city apartment filled with sunlight and small succulents, and had a job that many envied, strategy lead at a respected tech company. On paper, she was free, no children, no partner, plenty of income, and full autonomy over her time. But in our first session, she looked at me with eyes that had learned how to smile without meaning it. "I can't breathe," she said quietly. I asked her to close her eyes. We breathed together, one breath in, one breath out. Then I asked, "What's keeping you caged?" She opened her eyes, confused. "Nothing. I'm not trapped. I just feel like I can't leave, can't stop, can't say no." So I invited her to write a list of things she had to do in a day. Answer emails before 9. Be available on Slack. Stay late to seem committed. Meet expectations. Don't upset clients. Appear relaxed. Be grateful always. The list went on. When she finished, I slid the paper toward her and asked, "Can you see the bars now?" There was a long silence. That's the funny thing about cages, especially the ones made of invisible obligations. They don't clang shut. They hum quietly. They are built not from force, but from fear, expectation, and the stories we tell ourselves about who we have to be. That day, Alara saw her cage. And that's always the first step, not escape, just the seeing. We tend to think of freedom as an event, a quitting, a leaving, a breaking, free. But in truth, freedom begins as perception. It is an inward noticing that something about our life is running on rails we didn't choose. It could be the routine you never questioned, the career path someone else dreamed for you, the role you keep playing to please others, or even the constant need to perform gratitude, because somewhere along the way you were told you don't deserve to want more. The Stoics believed that freedom wasn't the absence of obstacles, but the presence of clarity. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." But what does that really mean? To become aware of every string tugging at your arms, every belief that tells you you must, every habit you follow, like a well-trained pet. If you never stop to look, you'll never know you're in a script you didn't write. That's why awareness is sacred, because seeing the cage is how the door begins to open. Most people aren't trapped by force. They're trapped by the fear of disappointing someone who isn't even watching. Pause with that. Whose approval are you still chasing? Whose disapproval do you dread? Would you still live the way you do if no one ever saw it? The idea that we live free lives is comforting, but look closer. How many of your choices are truly yours? This is not a judgment, it is an invitation, not to rebel blindly, but to see softly. You might be caged if you feel guilt when resting. You say yes faster than you mean it. You often tell yourself, "I should be grateful," when your soul whispers, "I feel trapped." You live for vacations, not ordinary days. You keep up appearances more than you keep up with your own peace. These are not signs of weakness. They're echoes of how deeply we've been trained to survive in systems we never chose. Freedom doesn't arrive with fanfare. It begins with a whisper. "This doesn't feel like mine." Tonight before bed, write down every sentence that begins with, "I have to." Just 5, that's enough. Then gently ask, who told me this is true? What would happen if I didn't? Do I want to believe this, or am I afraid not to? This isn't a task to fix yourself. It's an invitation to meet yourself. You may find that some cages are just stories waiting to be rewritten. When Alara returned a few weeks later, she had made no dramatic changes. She hadn't quit her job, run off to Bali, or deleted Slack. But she said, "I'm experimenting with saying no to things that used to own me, and nothing has collapsed." That's freedom. Not the Hollywood version, but the slow, steady reclaiming of your right to choose. You don't need to break out. You just need to begin noticing where you never walked in freely to begin with. And in that noticing, the air starts to feel different. Healing story, the outsourced voice. There was a man named Felix, mid-40s, a father of two. I met him during a retreat where we spent 3 days in silence. No phones, no speaking, no distractions. On the second morning, I found him sitting by the lake, fists clenched, eyes wide. Not with rage, but confusion. He looked like someone who had just heard a noise no one else could hear. He finally whispered to me, "I don't know what I want. I only know what's expected." I sat with him. He told me about his life. Studied law because his father had. Married because it was time. Took a job at a firm because it was respectable. Bought a house because that's what men do. Had children because love was supposed to look like a family photo. And now, he didn't hate his life. He just didn't recognize it. Every decision had been weighed on someone else's scale. Every choice filtered through the expectations of parents, colleagues, mentors, society. It was like he'd outsourced his freedom, loaned it out one decision at a time, until he woke up one day a stranger in his own story. We didn't fix it that day, but he took one deep breath and said, "I think I want something again." Freedom doesn't disappear all at once. It's not taken in one grand betrayal. It's signed away slowly like small contracts we don't remember agreeing to. Sure, I'll follow this path. Of course, I'll do what's expected. Yes, that makes sense. I'll fit in. Little by little, you stop asking what you want, because it's easier to follow the template, because others seem so sure of what's right for you. But here's the truth. No one tells you early enough. Every time you let someone else define your next step, you gently step out of your own life. It's not evil. It's not malicious. It's often done out of love. But it's also how people wake up decades later realizing they've been incredibly obedient but rarely truly alive. The philosopher Alan Watts once said, "Trying to define yourself is like trying to bite your own teeth." You can't outsource your freedom. You either choose or you are carried. And being carried is not always a kindness. A life of borrowed choices is still a prison, even if the walls are made of praise. Are you living in a story designed for someone else's approval? Are you choosing or just agreeing? The hardest part of reclaiming your life isn't rebellion. It's admitting you gave the pen to someone else. That takes tenderness and courage. You might have outsourced your freedom if you describe your life by listing others' expectations of you. You feel guilty imagining a different path. You say, "I should more often than I want." You perform your values rather than feeling them. You feel disconnected from your own future like it's something scripted by someone else. This is not shame. This is a signal. You are waking up. A soft practice. Write this sentence. I want to want. Tack. Let yourself fill in the blank, not with what's logical, acceptable, or smart, but with what is true, even if it doesn't make sense yet. Then ask, when was the last time I made a decision purely because I desired it? Whose voice speaks loudest when I doubt myself? What might I do differently if no one ever saw or judged me? Sit with those. You don't need an answer. You just need a question that's yours. When Felix left the retreat, he didn't burn his life down, but he began reauthoring it. He started painting again. He took Fridays off and took his kids hiking. He told his father kindly that he was grateful but done carrying his legacy. Freedom didn't roar in like a revolution, it returned like a voice he'd forgotten, the one that had whispered since he was young, before he learned how to please. That voice is still inside you too, not loud, not demanding, but patient. And it will return the moment you stop outsourcing your permission. You don't have to escape your life, you just have to start living inside it. Healing story, the velvet trap. Jared was not unhappy. He had everything in place. Steady job weekends free, good salary, Netflix subscription, and a 3-bedroom condo with carpet so plush you could fall asleep on it. "I'm good," he'd say when people asked. And he meant it, at least he thought he did, until one night he called me. His voice was hollow. "I can't stop thinking that I've made my life so comfortable, that I've stopped growing, that I've padded everything so much there's nowhere left to fall or rise." He was quiet for a long time, then said, "It's like I've made a cocoon so warm that I'm too scared to hatch." Jared had built what many people dream of, a soft life, predictable and low in friction. But he didn't feel free. He felt sedated. There were no sharp edges, no risk, no mistakes, but also no magic. And soon slowly he realized the truth. Comfort can become its own kind of prison, especially when you stay there too long. Safety is not the same as aliveness. There's nothing wrong with being comfortable, but there's a quiet danger in only seeking comfort, because life shrinks in direct proportion to your willingness to stretch. We build routines that feel safe, but soon become suffocating. We avoid discomfort only to become numb. We stick to predictable scripts and forget how to improvise. Seneca wrote, "It is not because things are difficult that we do not dare. It is because we do not dare that things are difficult." But what if it's not fear that holds you back, but the seductive pull of ease? Freedom requires a certain relationship with discomfort, not masochism, not recklessness, but a gentle leaning into the unknown. A willingness to be awkward, to begin again, to risk being seen as a beginner. If you've built a life that asks nothing of your courage, you may not be living, you may just be managing. Comfort is a drug. Once you get used to it, it becomes the only thing you seek, even if it costs your soul. Let that echo. Have you chosen your comfort, or has it chosen you? How often do you trade wonder for certainty? Would you still live this way if you weren't so good at surviving it? Comfort tells you you're okay, but aliveness asks, is this it? You might be living in the prison of comfort if you haven't done something new in months, not because you're content, but because you're tired. You say maybe later to most things that once excited you. You avoid challenge, not because you fear failure, but because you fear effort. Your days blur together in a pleasant but hollow rhythm. Deep down, you wonder if you've built a beautiful cage. Again, this isn't failure. This is a call, a knock, a whisper from the edge of your life. Tonight, ask yourself, when was the last time I did something that made me uncomfortable on purpose? What have I stopped trying just because I got good at avoiding discomfort? What small risk could I take this week that wouldn't break me, but might wake me? Then pick one tiny discomfort, just one. Something you avoid, not because it's dangerous, but because it's unknown. Try it. Not to win, not to fix yourself, but to feel yourself again. Jared didn't become an adventurer overnight, but he began small. He joined an improv class, said it scared him more than skydiving. He stopped micromanaging his calendar and took unplanned walks. He let himself be bad at something again. That was the key, letting himself be new. He later told me, "I thought comfort was peace, but real peace only came when I remembered how to move." If your life feels soft, warm and numb, you're not broken. You've simply forgotten how capable you are. Freedom doesn't always mean escaping. Sometimes it just means stepping into something uncomfortable and remembering, oh yes, I'm alive. Healing story, the the quiet grip of shame. Nadia was one of the brightest people I've ever met. She had a gentle voice, always measured, always careful, like every sentence had to pass a silent test before it left her lips. She came to me not because she was falling apart, but because she felt like she was never fully there in her own life. "I feel like I'm always managing people's impressions of me," she said. "Like if I stop performing for a second, everything will collapse. Or they'll see who I really am and leave." We dug deeper, and there it was. Shame. Not the loud kind that screams. Not the kind tied to some massive event. But the quiet, familiar shame, the one shaped slowly over years. Shame that said she had to always be likable. Shame that said asking for help made her weak. Shame that whispered, "Don't be too much. Don't be too loud. Don't need anything." That kind of shame doesn't chain you to a wall. It teaches you to build the wall yourself and then decorate it with success and politeness so no one ever notices. Until one day you realize you didn't build a life, you built a defense. Shame is not guilt. Guilt says I did something wrong. Shame says I am something wrong. And once that voice lives in you, it becomes a filter over every decision. You stop choosing based on desire and start choosing based on avoidance. You avoid being seen, avoid being judged, avoid standing out, avoid failing publicly. You curate yourself, edit your honesty, and slowly, quietly, your choices are no longer yours. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." But here's the twist. When shame is your compass, rightness becomes a performance and truth becomes a risk. So you obey shame's rules. Be good, be modest, be small, be safe. And it feels like virtue until you start to feel hollow. Shame doesn't have to raise its voice. It only needs to whisper, "Who do you think you are?" And we retreat. Think about that. What have you not done because you were afraid of looking foolish? What have you held back? Not because it wasn't right, but because you feared disapproval. So many of your choices weren't made with clarity. They were made with fear, wearing a mask of humility. That's not wisdom. That's survival. But you weren't born just to survive. You might be living through shame. If you hesitate to speak your opinion until others do, you say "I'm fine," even when your body says otherwise. You fear both failure and success because both invite attention. You often replay small mistakes as if they define your worth. You apologize for existing a little too often. These aren't flaws, they're clues. Clues that shame is quietly piloting your choices. A soft practice. Write this sentence and complete it honestly. If I wasn't afraid of being judged, I would asshole. Then ask yourself, what story am I still believing about my worth? Who taught me that being seen was dangerous? Can I offer compassion to the part of me that learned to hide? Shame doesn't evaporate with logic. It softens with attention. It loses power when met with tenderness. Let yourself be more than palatable. Let yourself be real. Nadia didn't become a radically expressive person overnight. But she started telling the truth to herself first. She said no when she meant no. She admitted she was tired. She let a friend see her cry. "I always thought people would leave if they saw the real me," she said. But they didn't. And if they do, maybe they were never really with me in the first place. Shame isn't always dramatic. Often it's just a quiet rearranging of yourself so you won't be rejected. But freedom is the moment you stop apologizing for the shape of your soul. You are not broken. You are simply shedding a mask you never needed. Healing story, the need to be nice. A man named Theo once came to me exhausted not from overwork, but from over-pleasing. He was the reliable one, the peacekeeper, the guy who always knew how to smooth things over, how to take one for the team, how to never make things awkward. He'd say yes to things he hated, He'd laugh at jokes that made him uncomfortable. He'd answer texts at midnight, smile through resentment, and apologize even when he didn't know what he'd done wrong, all because he couldn't bear the idea of being disliked. "I know it sounds shallow," he said once, "but I feel physically sick when I think someone's mad at me, like I'm falling out of the world." We traced it back, as we often do. Childhood. Moments when love felt conditional, when approval was the currency that bought attention, when being good meant being agreeable. Somewhere in those early years, Theo made a silent vow: if I am liked, I will be safe. And so, like many of us, he built a life not around who he was, but around who others wanted him to be. There's a deep, ancient part of the brain that equates belonging with survival. In our tribal history, to be exiled was to die. And so we learned very early on to conform. But what once kept us safe has now become a prison, because today the exile is emotional, not physical. And the threat is not death, it's disapproval. We now curate ourselves like a social media feed, show the good angles, hide the mess, perform the persona, stay likable. But here's the paradox: the more we try to be liked by everyone, the more we abandon ourselves. And in that abandonment, freedom dissolves. Seneca wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor." Craving constant approval is a poverty of self. It keeps us dependent on shifting winds. It keeps us performing long after the curtain should have closed. Because if everyone must like you, you will never fully be you. If being liked means being less of yourself, what exactly is being liked worth? Sit with that. Is your likability costing you your truth? Is it costing you your energy, your authenticity, your voice? Who are you when no one's watching? And what parts of you disappear when others enter the room? The need to be liked is understandable. But if it becomes your compass, you'll always be off course. You might be caught in the lie if you rarely express disagreement even when you feel it. You find yourself mentally rehearsing conversations to avoid conflict. You often feel drained after social interactions. You feel anxious when someone doesn't reply or seems off. You frequently say yes when you long to say no. These signs aren't failures. They're signals of a nervous system trained to survive through adaptation. But you don't have to shapeshift anymore. You're allowed to have edges. Try this sentence today. "It's okay if not everyone likes me." Say it again, out loud. Let your voice carry it. Then reflect. Where did I first learn that being liked meant being worthy? Whose approval have I chased for too long? What would I say or do differently if I trusted that I didn't need to be liked to be loved? Then choose one moment today to tell the truth. A small no. An honest "I don't agree." A yes that's for you, not for harmony. You don't have to shout. You just have to stop shrinking. Theo didn't transform into a confrontational person. That wasn't the goal. But he began honoring tension. He allowed silence in conversations where he would have filled it with fake agreement. He started asking, "What do I think?" before asking, "Will they like this?" And the world didn't end. Some people were surprised. A few backed away, but others leaned closer. "They finally got to meet me," he said. "Not the ambassador I sent in my place. You are not here to be everyone's favorite. You are not a product. You are a person. And the people who matter most, they don't need you to perform. They need you to be real." Healing story. The weight you didn't notice. Lena sat across from me, hands folded back straight. Everything about her posture said discipline, composure, control. She had achieved a great deal 10 years at a prestigious company, 2 promotions, a neat apartment with monochrome walls and matching silverware. But when I asked her how she felt in her life, not about it, but in it, she didn't answer for a long time. Finally, she whispered, "I think I owe the world too much. Not financially, not legally, spiritually." She spoke of favors never returned kindness, never repaid expectations, never fulfilled. She had built her life not around freedom, but around debt. Emotional debt, identity debt, family debt. She said yes to people because she felt she owed them. She stayed in her job because her parents had sacrificed for her to get there. She didn't pursue her dream of writing because other people had it worse, and she didn't want to be selfish. Every decision was weighed down by invisible ledgers. Her soul was overdrawn, except the bank she was paying didn't even exist outside her own mind. And that's when we uncovered the truth. Lena wasn't unfree because she lacked choice. She was unfree because she had internalized a story that she had to earn her right to live as herself. Not all prisons are built from fear. Some are built from loyalty. The kind that says, they did so much for me. How could I ever walk away? Or after all I've been given, who am I to want more? These are the unpaid debts of the soul. But here's the truth that may unsettle you. You do not owe the world your life. Gratitude is beautiful, but not when it becomes bondage. Kindness is sacred, but not when it becomes currency. True service must be free. True giving must flow from fullness, not guilt. Marcus Aurelius reminds us, do not waste what remains of your life in speculating about others. It is not fitting that your mind be distracted by things beyond your control. But what if the thing beyond your control is the past? What if your loyalty to it is the very thing keeping you from the life you're meant to live? If gratitude demands your obedience, it has become a cage, not a virtue. Let that stir something. Gratitude should lift you. If it only weighs you down, it has been poisoned by guilt. Are you choosing or compensating? Are you living your life or making payments on someone else's? You might be carrying soul debt if you say they did so much for me. To justify self-abandonment, you resist joy or rest because you haven't earned it. You make decisions based on what you owe, not what you desire. You struggle to receive without trying to repay. You suppress your dreams because they seem too indulgent or selfish. These are signs not of selfishness but of over-responsibility. You've mistaken love for labor and service for submission, a soft practice. Write this: I am allowed to choose my life even if it disappoints those who gave me theirs. Then gently ask, who am I still trying to repay with my obedience? What belief tells me I must suffer in return for love? Can I honor the past without living inside it? Then pick one area of your life where you're making a choice out of obligation. Ask, what would freedom look like here? Even imagining it is a first act of liberation. Lena didn't walk away from her job the next day, but she began to write again. Just 10 minutes a day. She started saying no, even when it felt like betrayal. She called her mother not to ask permission, but to speak honestly. Over time, she realized she wasn't actually rejecting those who had loved her. She was simply returning to herself. And as she did, something miraculous happened. The people who truly loved her didn't leave. They began to see her. Here's the lesson: you don't repay love by disappearing. You honor love by living. You were not born to pay off a debt. You were born to become. Healing story: the unspoken life. There was a woman named Isla who smiled more than she spoke. You'd like her instantly. She was polite, composed, never demanding. Her sentences ended in question marks even when she was making statements. People called her low maintenance, easygoing, grateful. And yet in her third session with me, she cried the moment I asked a simple question: what do you want? She couldn't answer, not because she didn't care, but because she had spent most of her life silencing that part of herself, the part that longed, reached, craved, dared. I'm afraid that if I say what I want, people will think I'm selfish, she said. Or worse, they'll leave. So instead, she lived in suggestion, in hints, in quiet compromises. She dated men who seemed good enough, took jobs that were close enough, ate at restaurants she didn't like just to keep the peace, never asked for help, never asked to be held longer, never said, This is what I truly need. And that's when we uncovered something deeper than fear. She had confused silence with safety. But Sashi's silence is not the same as peace. And not asking is not the same as not wanting. Why the self-abandon cannot be free. So many of us struggle to say what we want. Not because we lack desire, but because we were taught that desire itself was dangerous. We learned early, wanting too much made us greedy. Needing made us needy. Speaking up made us difficult. Asking for more made us ungrateful. So we dimmed the light. We became fluent in suggestion instead of clarity. We became agreeable to the point of disappearance. We told ourselves it's okay, I'll adjust, I'll settle. And that's how the inner self shrinks. Not in rage, but in the quiet erosion of not being chosen even by ourselves. Epictetus said freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. But what if the thing you can control, your voice, is the very thing you abandon? To be free, you must declare what you want, even if it's inconvenient, even if it's rejected, even if it makes people uncomfortable, because otherwise you are living on borrowed silence. If you can't say what you want, don't call yourself free. Let that sit for a moment. How many times have you swallowed your truth to keep the mood light? How often have you dressed your desire in softer language so no one would flinch? How much of your life is shaped not by what you want, but by what you're willing to tolerate? This is not a call to selfishness. It's a call to integrity. You might be afraid to want if you freeze when asked to state your preferences. You feel guilt for needing support, love, rest, or space. You rarely initiate hard conversations. You convince yourself you're fine, as long as others are. You often wait for others to make the first move, offer help, or ask the right questions. These are not just social patterns. They are survival strategies, clever ones, but costly. You can't build a full life on partial truths. Today, write this sentence. What I want but haven't said aloud is, don't edit, don't soften, don't explain. Then ask yourself, what am I afraid will happen if I say this out loud? Where did I learn that my wants are too much? Who taught me that needing something made me less worthy? Now choose one thing you want, small or large. Say it to yourself. Then say it to someone you trust. Freedom begins when your voice returns. Isla didn't suddenly become demanding, but she stopped apologizing for having needs. She asked her partners to hold her longer. She told her boss she wanted more creative work. She started painting again, not for profit, but for pleasure. And she began to smile, not to please others, but because she meant it. She later said, every time I speak what I want, a small piece of me comes back. Here's the truth. Wanting is not a sin. Needing is not weakness. Speaking is not aggression. It is freedom reclaiming its rightful place. Your wants don't make you ungrateful. They make you human. Say them, not so the world will always agree, but so you no longer disappear. Healing story, the perfect life that didn't fit. When Ravi came to me, he was living what many would call a dream. Married, 2 healthy children, a suburban home with a garden, a golden retriever named Leo, stable income, annual family trips, the kind of life you see in commercials, neat, warm, predictable. I have nothing to complain about, he said, but his eyes told a different story. They were dim, not with sadness, but with disconnection. He wasn't in crisis, he wasn't suffering, he was simply drifting. I should feel happy, he admitted. Everything I worked for, I got. But I feel like I'm just maintaining a life that doesn't feel like mine. We talked for a while, and it became clear Ravi hadn't chosen the good life. He had followed it. A path handed to him by culture, family, television, LinkedIn posts, and well-meaning elders. He hadn't built a life, he had inherited one. And somewhere along the way, he stopped asking if this was truly his idea of good, or just the one he was trained to want. There's a subtle danger in a life that looks right from the outside but feels hollow within. It's the danger of chasing default dreams. The house, the job, the spouse, the weekend routines, the financial milestones. None of these are bad. But if they're adopted without reflection, they become golden handcuffs. We're told, do these things and you will be fulfilled. So we do. And when we feel empty, we blame ourselves. Because if the good life didn't work for us, does that mean we're the problem? Seneca reminds us, you act like mortals in all that you fear, and like immortals in all that you desire. We spend so much time fearing that we won't achieve the approved version of life that we forget to question whether it even suits us. Freedom requires this questioning. Otherwise, you may wake up one day living a life that checks every box except your own. The good life is only good if you chose it with your eyes open. Pause. Did you build your life? Or did you just keep walking forward because the next step was clear, convenient, or expected? Whose version of success are you living? What would your life look like if you stripped away every should? Not to throw it all away, but to hold it up to the light and ask, do I want this truly? You might be trapped in the good life if you feel guilty for being dissatisfied even though you have it all. Your routines feel more like obligations than expressions of joy. You can't remember the last time you chose something wildly different. You often find yourself daydreaming of something else without knowing what. You stay where you are because starting over would be foolish. These aren't signs of immaturity or entitlement. They are signs of awakening. A good life is not always a true life, and you deserve something true. Tonight, write this sentence. My idea of a good life, when no one is watching, includes. Write freely. No edits, no fear of judgment. Then ask, what parts of my life were inherited, not chosen? What have I never questioned because it's what people do? What might I explore? Not to destroy my life, but to reconnect with it. Freedom is not always found in drastic changes. Sometimes it's found in gentle honesty. Ravi didn't blow up his life, but he started writing again late at night just for himself. He and his wife began taking trips that didn't involve Instagram-worthy destinations. He enrolled in a philosophy course, not for a degree, but for wonder. He even admitted with some fear, I don't want to be promoted. I want to create again. He didn't leave his life. He stepped into it on his own terms. That's the heart of freedom. Not rebellion for the sake of rebellion, but returning to your core and asking, does this feel real to me? Because a life that looks good to everyone else but feels dead inside is not a life. It's a performance, and you were not born to perform. You were born to choose to change, to feel alive in your days, not just secure. Healing story. The familiar ache. Marin was soft-spoken, but there was a storm in her stillness. She walked into my office like someone carrying an invisible suitcase, heavy, quiet, and always within reach. She didn't want to talk about her past. She wanted to talk about why she couldn't move forward. I know I'm stuck, she said. I just don't know why. Every time I get close to something new, I sabotage it. I freeze. I back out. I asked her to close her eyes and describe what moving forward looked like. She paused, then said, it looks like betrayal. That word echoed in the room. You see, Marin had been through real heartbreak. A mother who disappeared emotionally. A partner who weaponized silence. A best friend who once promised forever, then vanished without explanation. Over the years, Marin built her identity around those wounds. Not because she wanted to suffer, but because suffering became familiar, predictable, safe even. To be happy, that was dangerous. To trust again, too risky. To succeed, that felt like a kind of forgetting. And in that realization came something both terrifying and liberating. She wasn't staying stuck because she was broken. She was staying stuck because she was loyal. When pain becomes a home, there's a strange thing we humans do. We attach to what hurts not out of masochism, but out of memory. We cling to familiar wounds because in a world full of uncertainty, at least they are known. The pain becomes a landmark. It shapes our personality. It earns us protection. Sometimes it even earns us love. We start to believe, often without knowing it, this pain is who I am. If I let go of it, who will I be? Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way, but the obstacle only becomes the way if we are willing to walk through it, not decorate it, not protect it. If your pain becomes a badge of honor, or a shield, or a narrative you recite too often, then it may also become a prison." Freedom demands something heartbreakingly brave, the willingness to live without your old pain. Some of us stay loyal to pain because healing would mean losing the only story we've ever told. Let that sink in. Are you clinging to a version of yourself shaped entirely by injury? Are you afraid that if you heal, people will stop understanding you? Have you confused comfort with truth? We don't just need to heal our wounds. We need to be willing to outgrow them. And that takes more courage than surviving ever did. You might be loyal to old pain if you constantly bring up the past, not to process it, but to prove something. You fear being happy because it might be temporary or too good to be true. You avoid new relationships or opportunities, even though part of you craves them. You define yourself by what happened to you more than what you've chosen since. You feel guilt imagining a life where the pain no longer defines you. These are not weaknesses. They are signs that your nervous system is still guarding the castle of your oldest war. But you don't have to live in that fortress forever. Write this down. I honor what I've been through, but I am not only what happened to me. Then ask yourself, what part of my pain have I built my identity around? What would healing mean I had to release besides the pain itself? Who might I become if I stopped rehearsing the old story? You don't need to erase anything. Just loosen your grip. Let your hand open. Let something new arrive. Marin didn't forget her pain, but she stopped worshipping it. She stopped telling her story in past tense only. She let herself love again, first through a garden, then a dog, then a friend. One day she told me, I realized my pain was real, but I don't need to carry it into every room I enter. It doesn't need to meet every person I meet. That was the beginning of her freedom. Not the absence of grief, but the absence of identity tied to grief. You are allowed to move on, even if no one apologizes, even if no one acknowledges what you endured, even if it still aches on rainy mornings. Freedom is not forgetting, it is remembering and choosing anyway. You can let go, not because it didn't matter, but because you do. Healing story. Waiting for the green light, Elias was the kind of person everyone came to for advice, but never asked himself what he wanted. In our first conversation, he told me, I'm stuck, but I can't make a move until I'm sure everyone's okay with it. I asked everyone. He laughed nervously. Well, my family, my manager, my friends, my wife, my team, people on Twitter probably. There was silence. Then he added, and I don't even know what I'm asking permission for. I just can't seem to do anything unless someone else tells me it's okay. Elias had lived his life on green lights. He waited for signs, signals, invitations. He had brilliant ideas, real talent, a deep yearning for something different, but he could never move until it was confirmed, endorsed, or approved. And in that habit, he had unconsciously outsourced his freedom to a jury that never adjourned. He wasn't afraid of failure. He was afraid of disapproval. What he needed wasn't clarity. He had that. What he needed was permission. But here's what we discovered together. No one will ever give you permission to live your actual life. You have to take it. Authority is often imagined. From the moment we're young, we're conditioned to seek approval before action. Raise your hand before speaking. Wait your turn. Follow the plan. Check the rules. Make sure others are comfortable with your choice. And slowly we learn a dangerous idea that living authentically is something we must ask for. Even as adults, we carry this invisible instinct before we quit. We must be validated. Before we speak, we must be invited. Before we shine, we must be chosen. But the truth is harder and freer. You don't need permission to become yourself. You just need the willingness to live without universal approval. The Stoic Epictetus said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." Why? Because the minute you stop asking the crowd if it's okay to follow your inner compass, the crowd will think you're lost. But they're wrong. You're just not following their map anymore. The life you want is already waiting for you, but it won't hand you a permission slip. Think about that. How many dreams, truths, or risks have you postponed? Not because they weren't right, but because no one invited you to claim them. How much of your hesitation is really just a fear of looking bold, different, or self-directed? Is it possible that your stuckness isn't confusion, but deferred authority? You might be waiting for permission. If you often say, "I just want to make sure it's okay," before expressing yourself. You keep ideas to yourself until someone else voices them first. You seek confirmation or reassurance before making even small decisions. You worry more about how things will be perceived than how they feel to you. You silently wait for someone to go first before acting on your desire. These aren't flaws. They are echoes of an early training. Wait to be picked. But here's the truth. You can pick yourself. A soft practice. Write this sentence in your journal. "Today, I give myself permission to worship." Say it out loud. Then ask, what part of me is still waiting for someone else to say yes? What am I postponing until I feel completely sure? What decision do I already know is right, but fear-making alone? Choose one thing, small or large, that you've delayed. Don't wait for the stars to align. Don't send it out for review. Just move. Gently, quietly, boldly. Elias didn't change overnight. But one day, he did something he had never done before. He submitted a manuscript without telling anyone. Not for feedback, not for support, just because he was ready. He called me and said I didn't even know I was allowed to do that. And I said, "You always were." Here's the secret. The door was never locked. The jailer was imagined. The verdict never needed to be unanimous. Freedom begins the moment you stop asking for it. The moment you stop apologizing for existing in your full size. The moment you realize you were not put here to be managed by consensus. No one can give you permission to live. That's your gift to yourself. Take it, and take it gently but firmly. Healing story. The quiet that wasn't kind. Carla was a calm person. At least that's what everyone said. She didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. She kept things light. Even when others were falling apart, she remained composed like the eye of the storm. But when she came to me, she looked tired. Not physically, but soul tired. The kind of fatigue that sleep doesn't fix. "I don't fight with anyone," she said, "but I'm not okay." She described a life without drama. No conflicts, no raised voices, no major falls. Everything appeared smooth, but inside numb, disconnected, muted. She had learned to keep things peaceful by keeping them buried. Feelings were swallowed, needs postponed, boundaries blurred. Whenever anger surfaced, she pressed it down. Whenever sadness rose, she intellectualized it. Whenever passion sparked, she redirected it into productivity. And over time, her silence, once a strength, had become a mask. That's when she realized something that shook her. She hadn't created peace. She had created a silence so complete that even she couldn't hear herself anymore. Peace is not the absence of noise. There's a kind of quiet that heals, and there's a kind of quiet that hides. We often confuse stillness with peace, but stillness that comes from fear is just stagnation. Stillness that comes from repression is just delay. Real peace doesn't ask you to erase yourself. It doesn't demand silence at the cost of truth. It doesn't call you mature for never being moved. Nowhere you can go is more peaceful, more free of interruptions than your own soul. But that's only true when your soul is not cluttered with unspoken things. When we avoid conflict at all costs, what we often end up avoiding is intimacy. Peace is not permanent politeness. Peace is not never being upset. Peace is the ability to live in your truth without needing to explode or disappear. Anything else is just performance. If you have to go silent to feel safe, you are not at peace. You are in hiding. Let that sit. How many times have you bitten your tongue in the name of keeping the peace? How often have you smiled to avoid rocking the boat? How long have you confused emotional containment with emotional clarity? This is not a call to rage. It's a call to return. Return to the truth of your body, your voice, your longing to feel out loud. You might be mistaking silence for peace if you say it's fine more than you mean it. You avoid confrontation to the point that things never get resolved. You often feel like you're performing calmness, not living it. You think being upset makes you weak, dramatic, or ungrateful. You're praised for being low maintenance, but inside you feel unseen. These are not failures. They are indicators that your nervous system has learned to survive by being invisible. But freedom is not invisibility. Freedom is feeling safe enough to exist fully. A soft practice. Write this down. What I haven't said because I thought it would cause too much trouble is, now pause, then ask yourself, what truths have I swallowed in the name of harmony? What feelings have I convinced myself are too much? When did I start believing that silence was safer than self-expression? Choose one emotion you've been avoiding. Sit with it. Let it speak not to the world but to you. You don't need to shout. You just need to listen. Carla didn't become loud. She didn't flip her life, but she started saying things like, I'm not okay with that. I'm feeling something and I want to stay with it. I need more time, not because I'm confused, but because I'm finally feeling. And with every small truth spoken, her voice returned. Not just the sound, but the self. I used to think silence was strength, she said. Now I know that peace isn't the absence of conflict, it's the presence of wholeness. So here is your reminder. You are allowed to make noise. You are allowed to express disappointment, anger, joy, longing, not because it will always be easy, but because it will always be real. Silence is not safety, and peace is not pretending. Say it, feel it, live it. Healing story, the myth of arrival in his late 60s. Thomas was considered by many to be a free man, retired early, travelled often, grew olives on a quiet hill in Tuscany, no debt, no children, no boss, nothing tethering him to anything he didn't choose. But in one of our conversations, he told me something I'll never forget. I spent decades trying to earn my freedom, he said. I thought it would come once I checked off enough boxes, but now I know freedom isn't something you win, it's something you choose, and I still forget that some days. This was a man who had let go of almost everything, except the belief that freedom was a destination, a prize you could grasp, a final status you reach like early retirement or perfect peace. But real freedom, he realized, isn't permanent. It's not something you have. It's something you practice moment by moment. You choose it or you don't, not once, but daily. Freedom is a discipline, not a reward. We often imagine freedom as a grand finale, when the debts are paid, when the trauma is healed, when the house is bought, when the kids are grown, when everything finally calms down. But here's the truth that makes us both nervous and free. Freedom doesn't arrive. It's claimed over and over again in how you speak, in what you say no to, in what you allow, pursue, release, forgive, or walk away from. And more than that, it's in how you think. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. He didn't say you have power over your salary, your past, your partner, or your success. He said your mind, because no one, no system, no boss, no memory can take from you the right to choose your stance, your attention, your inner posture. That is the daily decision. That is the discipline. Freedom isn't what you have. It's how often you choose not to abandon yourself. Sit with that. How many days have you let go of your truth in the name of keeping peace, being liked, or playing small? How often do you trade your sovereignty for certainty? What if freedom isn't some dramatic escape, but the quiet, hourly courage to stay on your own side? You might be forgetting to choose freedom if you feel free only when things go right. You think of freedom as something you'll have someday. You keep waiting for external validation to follow your intuition. You blame circumstances before checking your own alignment. You seek ease more than you seek clarity. Again, this isn't failure, it's just forgetting. And forgetting is human. What matters is that you remember and return. A soft practice. Write this sentence. Today, I choose to be free in how I take. Maybe it's how you respond, how you speak, how you rest, how you forgive. Then ask, where am I waiting for life to allow me to be free? What does choosing freedom actually look like in my ordinary day? What would it mean to practice this quietly today? Start small. Choose from within. Repeat often. Freedom doesn't need a stage. It needs your presence. Thomas still tends to his olives. He still walks every morning through quiet dirt roads. But now he says something new to himself when he rises. I am not free because of where I live. I am free because of how I live. You don't need to quit your job, move to the mountains, or renounce all belongings to be free. You just need to stop abandoning your truth. To choose honesty when it's easier to conform. To breathe instead of react. To walk away when staying means self-erasure. To speak when silence means self-betrayal. And yes, you will forget. But you can remember again and again. That's the rhythm. That's the practice. That's the truth. Freedom isn't a door you walk through once. It's a way you walk daily, with your eyes open, with your voice intact, and with your hand on your own shoulder, whispering, we're choosing us today. And that is enough. The core truth. Freedom isn't something given. It isn't earned, owned, or granted. It is chosen daily, gently, courageously. This series is not about political freedom, financial independence, or dramatic rebellion. It's about the internal freedom to be who you truly are, even when it's inconvenient, misunderstood, or unapproved. The 12 invisible cages. The cage you didn't notice. You're not trapped by bars, but by habits, obligations, and assumptions. Freedom begins when you see the invisible scripts you've been following, the freedom you outsourced. You can't delegate your choices. Living by others' expectations feels safe until it doesn't. When comfort becomes a prison, a comfortable life without challenge slowly turns into numbness. Real aliveness lives just beyond routine. How shame controls your choices. If you believe you're flawed, every choice becomes a disguise. Healing begins when you stop confusing shame for humility. The lie that you must be liked, being likable, can cost your truth. You don't need to be everyone's favorite. You need to be your own. Unpaid debts of the soul. You are not here to repay your ancestors by erasing yourself. Gratitude is not servitude. You can honor the past without being trapped in it. Why you can't say what you want, desire isn't selfish, it's sacred. Freedom requires a voice, and that voice must speak its needs. The trap of the good life. Even a picture-perfect life can be hollow if you didn't choose it. A good life that isn't true will never satisfy your soul. Emotional loyalty to old pain. Sometimes we hold on to pain, not because we want to, but because we've built our identity around it. Letting go is not forgetting, it's returning. Permission is not required. You don't need to be validated to act. You don't need to be chosen to begin. you're already allowed. The silence you mistook for peace. Peace without truth is not peace, it's repression. Real peace includes your full voice, even the inconvenient parts. Freedom is a daily decision. There is no finish line, no permanent liberation. Freedom is the practice of not abandoning yourself again and again. One final invitation. If you want to be free, stop waiting for permission to become yourself. Your life does not begin when things get easier. Your freedom does not arrive when you are finally ready. It begins when you return to your truth and choose it today, quietly, firmly.